Tim, first, thank you so much for doing this interview. Tim, one quick second. Mark, I bow to you. I have been a massive fan of yours for many, many years. What you've done for Canadian comedy, I mean, you set the standard for this. So I had to say that before I started everything else. Thank you for what you've done.
Thank you, Rudy, and thanks for all you do, getting all the interesting projects that happen in the country out to people so they can hear about them. It's you've done quite the service for us in this country.
Thank you very much. And, talking about this show, I wrote it down on what I thought, and I got to make sure that I read this. To me, this show is like a mix of Young Forrest Gump, The Wonder Years, and Diary of a Wimpy Kid all together, but done with a Canadian style to it. Tim, what do you think about that?
I wish we had that comparison 3 days ago. We were trying to actually come up with that exact thing, and those were some of the names we had or titles we had bounced around. But I completely agree. I think, yeah, there's that nostalgia element, but also at the same time, sort of an understanding that these three main characters are outsiders and sort of kind of coming together because they align based on their sort of alienation and that sort of thing. So that probably worked. Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Well, Tim, let's talk about it. What is this story about? Where does it come from for this series?
Well, I mean, Mark's book was, such an amazing read, and all the stories in it were so specific. Everything was incredibly unrelatable in so many ways, but all of this, the actual emotion and that sort of thing that existed within those very specific stories were super relatable. So I think what ended up happening was I think people across the country sort of gravitated towards the sort of, just the real people in those crazy stories. And then, so we started to think about it maybe as a TV show. And so we decided to pitch it and fill in the gaps. Some of the stories are real and some are sort of inspired by real events. And so that's sort of where we ended up.
Mark, this is real. I grew up with the strap. I grew up with, the bully. I grew up with being the remote control. I grew up with all of that. Just talk a little bit about, for folks who don't realize what this is about. Mark, please talk about what this is, please.
Yes, sir. Well, I kind of grew up in a home with older parents. I was what some people might call a surprise or a blessing, what others might call a mistake, I guess. And so I was a late addition to the family. So everybody was quite older. And we grew up my dad was on the radio. We grew up next to the radio station, way on the outskirts of town, no other kids around. So I would get bussed in to school with a bunch of kids who, in a kind of a tougher part of town, with tougher kids who all knew each other, who already had their power structures figured out, like who was the bully, who was the nerd, who was the whatever. So I'm thrown into this. And so I'm very much an old soul trying to navigate the playground. And then my bully in the show is a young girl nicknamed Fox because of her red hair. And she is also, the bully is often bullying people because they themselves are bullied at home or they have other reasons that they're lashing out. So she ostracized becomes part of our inner circle, as well as my actual friend, Richie Perez, who was the only person of color in our school with some diversity of a snowbank. It was as white Newfoundland could be, very, very white. And he was a Filipino Canadian kid. And he was, bullied and made fun of as well. So the three of us kind of hold on to each other like life preservers in an awkward sea on the playground. And form our little alliance. So there's two kind of worlds. I always think of it as my house being the Starship Enterprise and the schoolyard being the planet we beam down to and have our adventures and then come back, where Mark really has a great relationship with his 80-year-old grandfather, played by the great Malcolm McDowell, and who is sort of his guide through life. And they have wonderful conversations. In many ways, he is a closer age in spirit to Malcolm than he is to his schoolmates on the playground. So yeah, it's just, everybody feels like the outsider, I think. Even sometimes popular kids or bullies feel like the outsider. And so I think it's relatable in that way for people. And it's all about, family, both the family we're born into, but also the family we kind of create with our friends.
One of the things I love, and Tim, I'm going to throw this over to you, is the fact of the detail of this series because again, I grew up seeing a lot of these things. Even with Mark talking about, his grandfather being in the same bedroom. Look, that's the way families were back then. Everybody shared rooms. In fact, you could have 4 or 5 people in a room. And just even down to the coffee mugs that you guys had, detail on design and everything else. How did you guys go about in finding everything? Telephones that kids today would look at and go, what is this and how do I use this?
I will throw this back to Mark because it's all Mark's stuff he saved from his actual hunt.
Mark, the detail on all this.
Yeah, we have wonderful team we put together. Our props people, our art direction, our set designer, just absolute the best, and they're fantastic. Some of the furniture though, and some of the things in the house actually came from my parents' home. There is a wicker set in the dining room that it was the only piece of furniture my grandmother ever really owned, and she had kept it in her home and in my parents' house, and now it's on her set. The kitchen radio, the old radio that's in the kitchen on the set, is the one that I listened to every morning growing up. It's the same one. So a lot of the stuff is kind of the driftwood of my life, but so much of the stuff, they just went wonderful detail. They scoured old photos of mine and found all kinds of wonderful things. And it was bizarre because you're in there and you write these things, and myself and Tim would come up with this stuff. And like, I'm picturing my kitchen in my head growing up as I'm writing the book and working with Tim on the scripts. But then all of a sudden I find myself in the kitchen that was in my head. So it's bizarre that way. And I'm dressed as my father in clothing that they made from looking at pictures of dad, recreating it. And in some cases, my dad worked in radio. He used to have to wear a red blazer to be a news guy and a gold crest of the logo. This dad's crest off his old jacket. So at one point I'm sitting down and in the corner, I can see out of my eye and my peripheral vision, my actual dining room furniture. I'm looking down, I'm dressed as my dad. And I have my arm on like the kitchen table. I'm thinking, what am I doing? It was kind of like an out of body experience, like being in a memory, But the great thing about it is, it's filled with all these other great memories of not just wonderful, warm memories of childhood, but great memories of the present. Working with who gets to make a show about their life with, their best friend. So and also these wonderful people like Malcolm and Benjamin, having them kind of take it from a memory and make it breathe new life into it and make it a wonderful new character. So it's been an incredible experience.
It's been an incredible experience watching this. Gentlemen, I want to say thank you so much for this interview. I cannot wait to see what else is going on. I want to see a Christmas edition. I want to see maybe, what happens after school in the summer. Like, I'm waiting for so many things because I so relate to this series. And it's one of the best that I've seen coming out right now. Gentlemen, congratulations. Cannot wait.
Thanks, Rudy.
Thank you, Rudy, for having us. And once again, man, thanks for all you do supporting so many artists.
Thank you.